We are here today, and Melissa Acuna-Dingo, I think I said it right, will be joining me again. She is amazing, and we are going to be talking about anxiety. You know, I was looking for my paper with all of her amazing qualifications that she has, but basically she is certified in NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming. And today we're going to be doing a live anxiety release technique. So if you're joining us now, let us know live, say hi. Hi, Allison. And if you're watching a replay, drop in the comments, I don't know, like hashtag replay or just replay, whatever, and let us know that you're here. And start thinking about a specific situation, event, or conversation that you have coming up in the future that is going to or has been creating anxiety for you. And you can follow along with us today and release this anxiety. Those just joining us today, the topic is anxiety. And start thinking of your own personal situation, event, or maybe a conversation that you have coming up that is causing you anxiety. And Melissa is going to do a live release from the technique of NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming. And we'll run through again and talk about a little bit about you and what that is, just in case someone didn't catch the live from last week. If you're watching now, say hi. And if you're watching a replay, say hello and replay. And yeah, so I want to just kind of comment because it's so crazy. I did not know really what anxiety was, and I never knew that I had it until 3 years ago. And I came home from traveling and I decided to go to therapy. And my therapist had pointed out that I have anxiety. And I was like, wow, what, really? So after that, I started to explore it, and I was able to identify it and name it and be aware of it and know what that feeling is. So for me, it shows up as like when I get in a situation, confrontation is a great thing. If I see confrontation, especially if someone comes at me and there's confrontation, my heart, it beats, and or my stomach, it fills in knots. And Melissa knows this about me. I've struggled in the past I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis from when I was 18. I am now 38, and it was only this year that I really feel that I've cleared it through the work that I've done. But what I realized, there was a huge correlation between my anxiety and stress that would trigger my condition and make me, a lot of people don't know this because I haven't shared, but I was really sick over the last 3 years. I went on this health journey, and I'm still on the health journey. I'm still healing. I feel I'm freed from the ulcerative colitis, and I feel very confident in saying that. And I think a lot of it was learning how to manage and yeah, I don't want to celebrate. Release my yeah, and release that anxiety, and how it has showed up for me in the world of healing and spirituality and emotional and mental healing and exploring techniques and modalities is that I feel like it's something that for me has been trapped in my body from an experience previously. And Melissa, you could talk more about this. I don't know if this is how it shows up for everybody, but as I've been releasing things through these healings that we've been doing and just exploring different things, I get better, and I can show up to confrontation and be present and not be as affected. I'm still working on things, but gosh, I can see such a difference. So I don't know, you tell us a little bit, you're the expert here. Tell us a little bit more about it.
Sure. Yeah. So I want to start off by saying wow, like my journey when I think about it, like I was a really, really anxious kid. So anxiety like became a very constant friend for a very long time. And oh, my phone is falling. Okay. There we go. The headphones make it really hard for my phone to stand. So, okay. let's let's hope that's gonna stay. Otherwise, I'll have to put something there.
It
Okay.
looks like it's doing good so far.
Yeah, it started to tip. Okay, I think we're good. Anyway, so I did many, many things to help kind of overcome my anxiety, to manage it, to cope with it, and to learn how to really tune in and learn how it shows up for me, right? Because as you were saying, like it shows up for you in a certain way, right? So for every person, anxiety shows up differently, right? There are some very common symptoms of anxiety, but the key is anxiety is a form of fear, right? And people often separate the two, right? They actually, you talk about fear and then you talk about anxiety, and they're very different. But anxiety, really, very, very, very simply put, is fear that is being projected into the future. So
Mm.
that's like very, very simple. But ultimately, what happens is, so, and you were talking about like past events, right? So trauma has a huge impact on anxiety, because what happens is you experience something, you experience a traumatic event. Yeah, there we go. I love it. And this traumatic event, right, you don't process the learning, right? I've talked about trauma a lot, but just I'll mention here, like, a traumatic event is something that causes a physiological and emotional response, like a really strong physiological and emotional response. So whatever that is, in that moment while you're having that event, something comes up, like you go into fight or flight mode, and you're not able to process what is going on, consciously or unconsciously. So you just suppress the emotions that come up, and you, a lot of the time, instill a belief. So there is a belief that comes up. There's some thoughts around yourself, your self-worth, the situation, whatever it is. And then that belief will stay with you until you release it. And then what happens is, every time you have another situation that triggers the same kind of emotional response, or that same belief, that same thought, the physiological symptoms come up. So whether it's, knots in your stomach, I know that was a big one for me, whether it's like heart palpitations, or, some people start sweating a lot, right? There's a lot of like um the dry throat. There's just all of like those fear symptoms, right, that come up. And
Yeah.
what happens is, as you know, anxiety is, like I was saying, it's fear that's being projected into the future, right? So usually we're anxious about things that haven't happened yet, right? We're imagining, we're telling ourselves all of these stories. And I always say this, and I think I've said this to you, Jennifer, like, we're such amazing storytellers, right? Like,
Oh my
and this is a
gosh.
reframe
Yes.
I always tell clients with anxiety, right? Like, as they're telling me all of the things that they tell themselves, I'm like, wow, just stop for a moment and notice, like, what a great storyteller you are, right? Like, because you just,
Appreciate it.
yeah, yeah, really, like, we tell ourselves all of these stories, and we create these scenarios, like all the what ifs that we think could happen, right?
Guilty.
I mean, we've all done it, right? Like, I will raise my hand and I will say, like,
Everybody. Yeah.
exactly. And I would say that more often than not, and I want to say almost all the time, but I'm sure there's some exceptions, but like, the story that we told ourselves is a million times worse than the actual reality, right? Like, when it actually plays out. Um,
Yeah.
but the thing is, what we're doing in our unconscious mind is, when we start to imagine like an event, right? We start to think about the future, right? I don't know if you've heard the term future tripping. Like, people do this where, like,
No.
yeah, so they're imagining like the worst in the future, and they're
Yeah.
tripping
Guilty.
themselves up over like the future, something that hasn't even happened yet, that doesn't even exist, right? And in a
Yes.
sense, you're like, you're cheating on your present with the future, right? Because you're not allowing yourself to really experience and be here now, because you're so focused on what's going to happen. And there's all of these, and the future doesn't even have to be that far out. It can be tomorrow, right? Like, that's the future that hasn't happened yet. And you could be feeling anxiety about an event that you have coming up tomorrow. Or you could be feeling anxiety about a situation that's going on around you, and you're telling yourself all of these things that, like, something's going to happen to you, or you're in danger, or, and again, like I said, like, this is a form of fear. And I'm sure you've heard many, many acronyms for fear. But one
Mm-hmm.
of the ones that I always use is like false evidence appearing real, because it's
Yeah.
our perception, right? We are projecting our perception onto the situation and whatever it is, right? So,
Yeah.
and that perception comes from, I talked about this a little bit in our last live, like, our internal representation. So that is like our image, our idea that we have created through our filters of what, what the situation is. So, we each see the world from a very different lens. We all have a very different model of the world. And our anxiety comes from that model. It comes from our perception. It comes from how we're seeing things and how that fear is showing up and how it's really being suppressed and being held inside. And if something as simple as like, I don't know, like you're a little kid and you were walking through your backyard and a snake just happened to like walk across your foot, um, didn't do anything to you, it didn't bite you, but you got scared, right? It triggered an emotional response because it was scary. It just came out of nowhere and it slithered on you and
Heck
it
yeah.
was new, right? You're like, what is that? You know what? Like, it's that simple, like, instant phobia installed. Like, that can actually happen at that level. And, then every time you see a snake, you think about a snake, someone mentions a snake, anxiety is triggered, right? You actually start to have anxious feelings and as well as like all the physiological responses. And what's interesting is your responses are most likely going to be the same responses you had when you were that little kid that first experienced that snake sliding across your foot. So it's fascinating stuff. But like, you know, what we're doing though is that we're saying this is going to happen again. I'm going to experience
Hmm.
that level of fear that I experienced in the past, right? Or if it's a really like severely traumatic event, it's very justified fear. Like, I'm not saying it's not, right? But like, let's say you experience something really deeply traumatic, right? And then any situation that reminds you of that on a subconscious level, because a lot of the time on a conscious level, you have no idea that this event is
Right.
triggering that, right? Or how trauma's playing a role, right? But let's say you're in an event and then all of a sudden you start to feel really anxious, you start to get really triggered, and you have no idea where that's coming from or why it's impacting you so much. And it's because your subconscious is going, alert, 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 right? It's reminding you of that trauma and it's saying, this is going to happen again. We're going to go through the same thing and it's going to be really scary. And, all of those, and then all the stories that start to come and play out.
Well,
Um,
and I just want to chime in too, because so what I hear you saying is anxiety. This is what I'm hearing, and I want to confirm it. And I
mhm,
have two things on it. One, what I'm hearing is that anxiety is a moment that happened in our past and created some type of emotional response, and we're holding on to it in our body. That's how it's experienced for me. And as I
mhm,
find
mhm,
these events and I release them through
mhm,
whatever modality it's been, NLP has been very helpful. And once I release them, I am free in the future,
mhm,
right? But then the other thing I just want people, and so that's one thing. The other thing I want to say is, because you're talking about traumatic events, I want to define a
mhm,
traumatic event,
mhm.
because when I hear traumatic event, or when I used to hear it, I think PTSD, people who served for us in the war, and it's something, huge, or a medical professional, or a first line hero that sees like people dying, but a traumatic event can be something so simple
Mhm,
in your life
mhm,
that happened that was traumatic to you at the time.
mhm,
And I'm speaking from personal experience here. There's things that have happened to me, and as an adult, I look back and I go, oh, well, that was no big
mhm,
deal. But as a little kid at, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up to, I think they say 7 is, when a lot of things happen that create who we are
mhm.
today, and we hold on to those things. It's very traumatic then. And I don't have the emotional intelligence back then. So little Jennifer Hart at 5 years old is holding on to these things going, oh my God, I'm so scared. And it could be something so simple. And you and
Mhm,
I have had this
mhm.
conversation because you've helped me to realize a lot of things that were traumatic. And I'm like, but I don't understand this. And, because I'm like, I'm processing it as an adult, but I wasn't an adult at the time.
Mhm,
And so
mhm,
I just want to share that with people, because I feel like that's a very key piece of information. So traumatic can be something
mhm.
that someone said something that hurt your feelings,
Yeah.
and you held on to that, and it was very traumatic for you. So traumatic is different for everybody.
Yeah, yeah. So as I said earlier, and I'll just repeat that because it's very important, is a traumatic event is an event in which you had a strong emotional or physiological response. So it doesn't matter what it is. It can literally be the simplest thing ever, right? But
Yes.
it impacted you, right? And
Yes.
as
Yes.
you said so beautifully, yes, as children, right? Like what is traumatic to a child is very different from what is traumatic to an adult, right? So as an adult, like we look back.
Oh, I lost you. You're frozen. Maybe you're getting a call right now. Can someone tell me, am I still live? Hello? Anybody? I see 12 people watching. Can you comment? Is it my phone? Ah, what happened? Melissa, come back. I see you, but I don't hear you. This is a new experience. We lost her. We lost her. Okay, she'll be back. I know she'll be right back. So, oh, she's back. I bet you she got it. Thank you, Allison, for the confirmation. We're bringing her back on. Woo, that was traumatic. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm gonna keep doing right now.
Okay. Sorry. So this is the problem with doing it on your phone. Like I got a call,
That's what I
and
figured.
even though I declined it, like it froze my whole screen. So
Okay,
sorry.
well, that was traumatic for me in the future.
Well, there you go.
All right. Thanks,
Oh
everybody,
man.
for hanging out. And I was like, I don't know if it's me or if it's her, and everything was silly. So thank you, everybody who told me I was still live. I appreciate it. And I was like, okay, dance break. All right. So you were sharing about how something so small could happen as a child, and then that creates a traumatic event.
Yeah. So, someone wrote, that's perfect. Yeah, exactly. So, and something that is traumatic to a child is very, very different from what is traumatic to an adult, right?
Yeah.
So I usually use this example because like for like a 2-year-old, right, having their parents fight in front of them, that can be traumatic.
Yes.
Right? Because a 2-year-old doesn't have the critical faculty to understand, like, the world doesn't revolve around me, everything that happens isn't my fault. So as soon as like they see their parents fighting, maybe they're screaming at each other, the 2-year-old has a response to that, the screaming, the tone, it's scary. They have an emotional reaction. They're sad because they can pick up on the energy of their parents. They feel like this is horrible. And then what's worse is they actually take it in and blame themselves for it. Like they say, oh, that's my fault. I caused that. And then what can happen from that is that they can actually instill a belief, right? That it's all their fault, that, they're not good enough, that blah, 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 blah. And then imagine, right? Like a few years down the line, their parents, that kid's parents get divorced. Imagine what that kid is now telling themselves, right? So because this belief has been cemented, it's been rooted, then the divorce happens and that trigger comes up from that 2-year-old, right? And this kid could be 10, 12, 14, it doesn't matter. That trigger comes up and then all of a sudden that belief is rooted even further because their subconscious mind, that 2-year-old is saying, it's all my fault. Like my parents are getting divorced because of me.
Yeah.
Right. And that whole self-worth piece, like it's so, so huge. And, that's one tiny example, but this plays out all the time. And one thing I wanted to say, because there's so many different types of trauma, right? Physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, like a paper cut. Like this is so funny, right? But a paper cut is one of the simplest injuries you can get, right? It's really, but that is traumatic to your cells, right? That's trauma. Like your cells are being broken down,
it hurts.
right? The skin is broken. Yeah, there is pain, right? Maybe it's not like an emotional trauma, but it's a physical trauma. There's trauma happening to your cells. Yeah. So just to understand that, like, because, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because so many people, and a lot of people I work with will tell me, like, what? I've never really experienced trauma. I'm like, I promise you have.
I think,
because every single person has experienced trauma at some point, right? And of course there's different levels, right? Like that's why earlier I mentioned like severe trauma, right? There is like what the things that you were saying, like PTSD, what war vets go through, like seeing people die, like, a very severe car accident, whatever it is, those things are severe trauma, right? Like, yes, very, very severe. They're on the higher end. However, like, there are experiences that you had, whatever age it was, that were so, so, so impactful for you, on a mental, emotional, maybe even physical level.
Yeah.
So, and those things will stick with you, that will stay with you, until you actually process the event, you process the learnings, and you release the emotional hold that it has. And, everyone that I've worked with that has anxiety, and with myself as well, like, I had such severe anxiety that going into a room with like more than 3 or 4 people, was terrifying to me.
Yeah.
It really was. And there was a point where I had such severe social anxiety that I didn't want to leave my house. Like, I wouldn't go to the supermarket because I was terrified of seeing people. Like, it was really extreme. And when I think about, the me even a few years ago, like, imagining doing a live, like, on Facebook,
Yeah.
like, there is no way that person would have ever even contemplated that, right? It was just like, no. But once you kind of look at that and you release it and you process the learnings, right? And you actually let go of what is really causing it at a root level, right? You actually start to release that response.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that anxiety can, to a certain extent, it's a normal human response, right? To an event that is happening. There are certain things that can make us nervous, and it's normal, right? When you're doing something new, when, you're putting yourself out there and it's really huge, like, that's a normal response.
Yeah.
But when it starts to cripple you on a daily basis, when it's actually stopping you from doing things because you're so terrified and you're so deeply in those thoughts, right, then it becomes a problem. And that's when it's often a disorder, right? And then there's just, you need to look at it. You need to, like, look at the root cause, because, to a certain extent, you can also learn to manage it and cope with it and say, okay, like, it's there, it's going to come up sometimes, but I know how to deal with it. I know how to recognize it. But then there's just a point where you're like, okay, this is getting really serious. It's not allowing me to live my life. Now, I really need to release this. So, yeah.
I think it's all good stuff. So today you are going to walk us through an anxiety release technique through neuro-linguistic programming, which, in case anybody is not familiar with neuro-linguistic programming, also known as NLP, can you give like a short description of what it is and why it works?
Yeah, for sure. So NLP is, there's so many different descriptions and definitions for it, but it's really like the study of success. So the two founders of NLP, they didn't create it, but what they did was they observed the most successful people in the world. Like, they were looking at all of these really successful people, and they paid attention to all of the patterns, right? So it was like, okay, well, what do they do? How do they communicate? What is their behavior like, right? And what is their internal world? What does that look like? Right? So now NLP is the way that we communicate internally and externally, with ourselves, with other people. And how does that then impact our physiology, right? Our state and our behavior, right? Because the behavior is the output that we put into the world. But it's actually it's a sum of everything that, like, has come in. So we've taken information in, we've filtered it through the way we process information, or what we call our modalities. So everyone has a different way of processing information. And then we take that in, it gets deleted, distorted, generalized according to our filters. And then it creates our state, our physiology, and our internal representation. So the way that we see that thing. And then that all combined creates our behavior, right? So if we have a certain belief, right, if we have a certain way of looking at things that has been installed and it's part of our programming, we are going to then take action based on that belief, right? So even if we're not aware that we have it, right? Because that's all happening on a subconscious level.
Right. Yeah.
So what NLP does that is so powerful is that it works with the subconscious mind. Right? So rather than having that battle, that constant inner turmoil and conflict that so many of us experience on a daily basis of, trying to set goals with our conscious mind, trying to move toward them, and then having our subconscious come in and divert it, we actually align the conscious and subconscious mind. Right? We rewire our subconscious mind to have more positive, more supportive goals, beliefs, emotions, whatever that is. And then so it will actually work with us and help us to reach our goals.
Yeah. I've experienced that personally from the work that we've done together. So it is amazing. And I was actually, what's funny is I feel like I was having a little bit of anxiety trying to figure out what I was going to use as my release today, because I'm feeling so good and on top of the world, and like I can conquer anything, and I'm like, there's really nothing coming up that is hindering me. I mean, I can think of situations like I was texting with Melissa and being like, okay, what about this? Like, can I use this? Because I sit and I look out the window right in front of me here, and there's this dog that always gets out in my neighborhood, and that gives me anxiety because when I see it, I'm afraid that it's going to get hit by a car. And that stems back to a traumatic event where I actually saw it happening, where I saw a dog get hit by a car, and oh my gosh, and I see that has created, anytime I see an animal out running, that happens. But I think we're going to use a specific situation. So I thought more about it. And I think I'm going to use a current situation. I'm throwing this out here. I didn't tell you about this one yet. So my mom recently had, a spot on her face, which turned out to be melanoma. So they went in and they had to cut it out. And it did not go as planned. So it went a lot bigger and deeper than anticipated. And they had to send her home with an open wound. They didn't anticipate that it was going to need to have like any changings or anything like that, but they gave her the supplies. Well, they were wrong. And so I had to change it. And it was very traumatic I'm not a medical professional, and I just want to give a shout out to anybody that works with like bodies and humans. Like, bless your heart, you are amazing, because that is not me. That is not my gift. That is not and it was traumatic for me to see it. And so now I'm anticipating like having to change her bandage again. It kept me up at night. Like, that's how it was. Like, I woke up in the middle of the night and I couldn't sleep because I was just, the wound, seeing it in the flesh, like I wasn't prepared for that. It was hard for me to see when they just did a biopsy on it, let alone see the whole open wound. And so I'm scared of when I have to change her bandage again before she goes back to surgery, hopefully this week, to get it closed up and all taken care of. So, I mean, obviously my first and foremost hope is that she, all the melanoma's gone, and then they will be able to move forward and she can start her healing process. But that was really traumatic for me. And I might have to change her bandage again and see it again. And so is that a good thing that I can use to let go?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I guess the first question that comes to mind really quick, so if you can just kind of tune in and maybe close your eyes and just take a deep breath.
If people are going to follow along, should they just do the same things?
We'll do that in a sec. I just have a question for you first.
Okay.
So what specifically brought up that anxiety, that fear for you? So when you think about, changing your mom's dressings, when you think about looking at that and the whole situation, what is that image for you? What is that first thought that comes up?
I guess I just, the first image that comes up is seeing the actual, cut open, the open wound, and I wasn't prepared for it. And it's one thing to see a wound like that, period. And I don't think, because I talk about it, and I don't think that people, unless they see it, could really understand what I'm feeling. But it's another thing to see it on someone you love and that is so close to
Mm-hmm.
you and that you care about. And that's what I told my mom, because I know that this has affected me because I'm angry. Um, um, I don't know how to explain it. Maybe this wasn't a good example.
No, no, no. It's good. It's good.
I think there's definitely deeper things there that I'm not even
Mhm.
consciously aware. And it's like, did they get it all? Are they going to have to do more cutting? Is there anywhere else to cut? What happens if there's not? Like all these unknown questions, and I was talking to my mom about it this morning, and I just said, I think there's deeper things there that it like triggered me, and am not even 100% aware right now of what those are. So it wasn't just seeing and being responsible for it. Oh, and then it's like, what if I mess something up? That was the biggest thing, because I'm not a trained professional. I mean, I know, like, wash my hands, I got alcohol, I put gloves on, I did everything that I could know to do, but I'm not a trained professional to be doing this. And what if something happens and I cause I don't know, something bad? What if, like, it gets infected and then I feel I'm at fault? So, that maybe is the thing I need to do.
So that's what I was wondering, because that's what I was feeling from you, is that it's more what seeing the wound represents for you rather than the actual wound, right? Because I mean, some people do, they get very freaked out by seeing blood and wounds and things like that, and that's fine. I mean, that just is, right? And if that's the case, cool, we can release the anxiety around seeing a wound, right? But for you, I feel like it's deeper, right? It's more about what it represents. And so I guess my question is, what specifically are you anxious about? Is it changing the dressing, like the next time you have to do that? Is it that actual act? Or is it past that? Is it beyond that? Is it, your mom's health? Is it what's going to happen when she goes back to the hospital? Is it post-surgery? Is it worrying about, is it going to get worse, or, all of that? Like, which piece do you feel is bringing you more anxiety? What is causing you more anxiety right now?
Okay, so what comes up when I close my eyes, everybody, like, if you're not into this work, like, it just seems weird, but I'm trying to just tune into my body, and I'm claircognizance and intuition, so I just know things. And what kept coming as you were talking, I was just listening and trying to feel it, is I'm gonna mess it up. I'm gonna do something wrong. If I don't treat the wound properly, it's a responsibility thing. This has shown up. So when you were talking about it, it's a reoccurring fear that I have in my life, even stepping into my power of coming on these lives and teaching people, sharing things, and leading people. It is this reoccurring thing that's like, what if I do it wrong? What if I lead someone to danger? That is not my intention, and I'm going to do the best I can, but what if something bad happens? It's a fear mindset. It's a scarcity mindset that I've had from something, obviously not even from this event, but because what if I don't clean it right, and then it got infected, and then that could lead to bad things, you know what I mean? Like, I don't even want to go that far, because that's a whole different thing. But that, when you were saying that, this is what comes up, is that it's my responsibility, and it's on me if anything goes wrong. I am the one to blame, I guess you could say. You know what I mean? So
okay.
Because every time I changed it, I was scared I was missing something. I wasn't doing it right. I was doing something wrong.
Yeah, definitely.
That's interesting.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Okay. Cool. Well, now that we have that clarity, do you want to release it?
Yes, please. Oh my gosh.
All right, cool. So for everyone that is listening, if you want to follow along with us, so I will say, obviously, you won't be having the specific guidance, but I do believe that if you just take a moment and get, as clear as you can, like, ask yourself questions like I just asked Jennifer. Just take a moment to ask yourself a question and say, what specifically am I anxious about, right? So if it's around a certain situation, what about that situation, right? So if you're anxious about a conversation, what is it about the conversation? Is it actually sitting down to have it? Is it telling the person you want to talk? Or is it, when you sit down, is it getting the words out? Or is it their response? What is it that you're anxious about? So the more specific you can be, the more powerful this is going to be. So I want you to just take a moment and just ask yourself that, and do what Jennifer did. Close your eyes and tune into your body and notice. So when you're asking yourself those questions, where do you have the strongest response, right? What is coming up? So if you are someone who struggles with anxiety a lot, and you've noticed, like, you tend to get heart palpitations, you tend to get, a tightness in your chest or knots in your stomach, notice when that comes up or when that is the strongest. So then that'll give you a clue as to, okay, that's what I'm really anxious about. Because sometimes we also make anxiety this huge overarching thing, and we think it's this whole situation that I'm anxious about, but actually it's one specific aspect of that situation, and I think that's really key. So yeah, go ahead and do that now. Just think about it, tune in.
Well, I will have a replay, so if they need more time, because when I go to
they can pause.
I'm always like, I need more time. And so the good thing is they can come back, they can do maybe you could journal on it. That has helped me. And ask yourself these questions, sit with it, and then come back and watch it again if you need to. And it's so crazy, Melissa, because I didn't even know this morning that was what I was going to bring up. It wasn't until I was getting ready for the day that that came to me, and I was like, I have something going on here. And it wasn't until you really asked me that it became clear that it's not the wound, it was the responsibility of caring for the wound. Because what I keep looking back, I know I'm angry because I can hear it when I am talking to people about it, and I've shared it, and I've noticed that feeling, and what I keep hearing myself say, this is my indicator once you brought it to my attention, is I keep saying, I am not a trained professional to care for this wound, which goes back to the responsibility piece. So good job. Oh my gosh. All right, let's get rid of
this. All right, awesome. So everyone, again, if you have it, perfect. So let's all just get comfortable. So, sit back in your chair, wherever you are, and let's go ahead and take 3 deep ha breaths. So Jennifer, you know this well working with me, but I'm going to guide you through it. So just take a deep breath in through your nose, deep breath in, hold at the top, and then we're going to release through our mouth with a ha sound. Let's go ahead and good. Let's do that again. Deep breath in, hold at the top, and release with ha. Good. And we're going to do that one more time. Deep breath in. Okay. Awesome. So for this technique, we are going to use your timeline. So if you've never heard of timeline work, you might be wondering what on earth that is. But everybody has a certain way that they see time, right? A representation of time. And when we work with our subconscious and its representation of time, we can actually really shift and release things. So the first thing I'm going to do before we actually go into the release is I'm going to do a quick timeline elicitation. And Jennifer's done this with me before, but I'm just going to walk you through it so that you can do it as well, so you can pull up your timeline. So if you haven't already at home, just close your eyes. Okay. All right. Okay, so just breathe and be really present for a moment. Okay. So if I were to ask you where your future is and where your past is, I have an idea that you would say it is from right to left, or back to front, or up to down, or somewhere in relation to you and your body. And it's not the conscious concept I'm interested in, it's the unconscious. So if I were to ask your unconscious mind, where is your past? In what direction would you point? Okay, awesome. And your future. If I were to ask your unconscious mind, where is your future? In what direction would you point? Okay, perfect. Do you notice that they imply a line? Okay, and can you show us, just for the purpose of this process, what it would look like if it were stretched out into a line? Okay,
Like an elephant.
awesome. Okay, perfect. So, and if you're doing this at home, just ask your unconscious. So just trust. And the first place that you want to point, the first direction that comes to mind, no matter where it is, take that. So go with that. That is your past. And then whatever comes up for future, that's your future. And then just notice how it would look if it were stretched out. Okay. So in a moment, I'm going to ask you to float up above your timeline. And when I say float, I mean visually, or however it comes to you, like floating in a bathtub or sound floating in the wind. However you float up above your timeline is perfect. So go ahead and float up above your timeline now. Okay. And just remaining above your timeline. Just notice again where your past is. And we're not going to any specific event, but just go ahead and float to the past. So just in the direction of your past. Are you there?
Yes.
Good. Okay, so float back to now and stop there. Okay, good. And now go ahead and float out into your future.
Okay.
Okay, good. And now float up so, so, so high that your timeline is 1 inch long. So way up above your timeline.
Okay.
Okay. Now float back down to now. And looking towards your future, float back in the past and higher up.
Okay.
Okay, awesome. Now just float back to now, float back into now, and come back into the room.
Okay.
Okay, so I know you've done that before, but I just want to give everyone at home a moment to just kind of catch up for a second. So the reason we did that is to start to create a channel and a communication between your conscious and unconscious mind, because it is actually your conscious mind that's guiding your unconscious to do that, to pull up the timeline. And I just want to say, like, if you couldn't see the timeline, that's okay. So as I mentioned earlier, everyone processes information differently. For myself, like, I'm very kinesthetic. I've shared this with Jennifer before, so I feel. And that sounds very strange, but like the way I experience this every time I do it is like I feel like I'm floating, and then I kind of just know. I kind of just feel like I'm being guided there, right? But some people very, very clearly see a timeline. They see it very, very like vividly, right? And that might not necessarily be your experience. You might also be very claircognizant, like Jennifer. You might just know. You might just be like, okay, yeah, I'm above my timeline, right? So however it happens for you is perfect. Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So once again, let's just get very comfortable. Lean back, close your eyes, take a deep breath in. Good. And Jennifer, I'm going to ask you, and then everyone can kind of ask themselves that question as well. So, what are you anxious about? What specifically?
Being responsible.
Okay. And being responsible in this case, right, for the purpose of this process is being responsible for changing your mom's dressing, right? And that the feelings around that. Is that correct?
Yeah, like being responsible for like having the responsibility if something goes wrong, to be specific.
Okay, great. Okay. So if you knew that the next time, or maybe every time that you had to change your mom's dressing, right, that it was going to go perfectly and smoothly, and that you were just going to show up there with confidence, with knowledge, that you were able to just go through the process in the most loving and expert way possible, and that you had actually already done it, that it was completed, that you had changed your mom's dressing and it was perfect, right? How would you feel?
Oh, it'd be great.
Okay.
It would be way different.
Awesome. All right, so let's go ahead and float up above now and bring to mind your timeline as it stretches out all the way out into your future and all the way out into your past, passing through now. Okay. Okay, so if the specific event that you're anxious about is, the next time that you have to change your mom's dressing, right? Go ahead and float out into the future, right? And trust your unconscious mind, right? So go let yourself be guided, but float out into the future to 15 minutes after the successful completion of the event about which you thought you were anxious. Okay, and make sure you see the event completing successfully. So imagine it all happening as beautifully, as perfectly, as wonderfully as possible. So see that whole event, everything that you were anxious about, just see it happening, see it unfolding perfectly. See, the wound getting cleaned, everything getting dressed perfectly, and then you feeling confident and feeling really good about it when you're done. And go ahead and tell me when you have it.
I have it.
Awesome. Okay. Good. Now, float back towards now. Well, actually, hold on a second. I'm just gonna stop for a second and I just want to stop for a second in case anybody is struggling with that. So if you are 15 minutes, you're in your future, you're 15 minutes after the completion of the event, right? So this event that you thought you were anxious about has already completed successfully, right? Okay, so I want you to really, really imagine that. Okay. So for Jennifer, for you, turn and look towards now. Okay. Is the anxiety gone?
No.
Okay. Are you really imagining this event completing successfully? So are you seeing it all really playing out?
No, I didn't watch myself do it. I just saw myself at the end, like going, yeah, like dancing.
Okay. Okay, that's awesome. I would say go through the event, like literally see yourself doing it. See yourself doing it with confidence. See the whole thing playing out as you really would wish and hope that it would.
Okay.
Okay. Is the anxiety gone?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. And for anyone at home, if you're still feeling like it might be a no, oops, my phone is falling. I want you to really try to get more specific with it. So see the entire event playing out perfectly and just notice, if you haven't really narrowed it down, like what part of it are you most anxious about? And then see that playing out perfectly. Okay. But for now, we're gonna keep going, and you can always come back and do this again. Okay, so Jennifer, go ahead and float back towards now and see all the events between then and now reevaluating themselves in light of your new choices, all the way back to now. So all of the events from then to now reevaluating themselves in light of your new choices. And keep doing that, keep floating, keep seeing all those events reevaluate themselves all the way back as you're floating back to now. And whenever you're ready, float back down into now, come back into the present moment, and go ahead and open your eyes.
Okay.
All right. Okay, how do you feel?
I feel good. Although I could feel like when we were doing it, I could feel my heart like beating like I was having anxiety. And then I was sitting there going, is this anxiety from the event or is this anxiety because I'm freaking doing this live on Facebook that's being recorded? Oh man, just being open and vulnerable. That could have been my moment.
And that's awesome. And it could be either, right? So it could be that it's coming up to be released. So often when you're doing this kind of work, like whatever it is that you're releasing can sometimes come up, and it can almost like it can get worse before it goes away, right? Because what you're doing is you're bringing it to the surface. So it's all in the subconscious and you're bringing it to the surface to be released, right? And then I just want to explain a little bit as to why we do it that way, like what we just did basically. So, you're imagining your timeline, right? And your subconscious, so your subconscious doesn't really have a very clear concept of time. So it has it all organized in a very linear fashion, right? And it knows we are at now. But when you travel to these different parts, whether it's to the past or whether it's to the future, your subconscious sees yourself there and believes that it is there. And what happens is when you're traveling to 15 minutes after this event and you see it completing successfully, right, there's nothing to be anxious about. It's going to release the anxiety because it's like, well, why should I be anxious about something that happened? And I know it happened, perfectly. It was successful. It was great. So at that moment, it releases the anxiety. And it's very similar when we do release work in the past. It's holding on to these emotions. It's holding on to everything that as a result of what happened. But so when we go further back in the past before it happened, your subconscious thinks that this traumatic event is in the future. So it says, well, there's no point in feeling all of this trauma from something that hasn't happened yet, right? So it's a very similar kind of process, only when we're doing the trauma release, it's a lot deeper. And I also want to say, so what we just did now, right, is to release anxiety around a specific event, right? Something that's going to happen. Now, if you have an anxiety disorder and you are living with anxiety on a daily basis, then there is a lot more deep-rooted stuff like under the surface, right? And even with you, Jennifer, like in this case, right, if it hadn't fully released, right, it could be that, we would need to go in and do the work around that belief, right? Around the belief that like, oh, I'm going to mess it up, or maybe there's some very deep fear that needs to be released. So we actually need to go and release that fear first and then do the anxiety model, right? So it depends on the level that you're at and where you are, how you're experiencing it, right? If you were like me, who like at that point, many years ago when I used to have such severe anxiety, like you need to do the deep release work, that I did, and go look at the root and see, okay, what is actually causing this anxiety, and then release that. Right. So there's many different ways to do this, but I kind of just wanted to give people a little bit of an idea, like a tiny glimpse into the kind of work. And what's so amazing about it is that it's very quick. It's very simple, right? And you can do that in a matter of minutes. And I still do that now when, like, I have some really big thing coming up, right? Like if there's an event or something that's like huge, like last year, I was sharing a very personal story on stage. And so I did get like pretty anxious about it. So, again, it's about running yourself through it really quickly and seeing it happening perfectly. And then you're just, okay, it's good. Like, I don't have anything to be anxious about.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, I definitely have lots of work to do. I can tell you that, especially like, I don't know, thinking about a lot of things from this whole situation. I'm like, ooh, yeah, there's like deeper rooted things there for sure that I didn't even realize till this conversation. So I'm super appreciative of you as always and your time. And if you have any interest in working further in the NLP or exploring more, finding out more, I know I think a lot of people who I've seen hop on, I'm not sure that they've ever even heard of this. And so this might all sound really crazy. And, it's on a deeper level for sure, exploring new things, deeper things. But Melissa, I'll drop your calendar link, so you guys can schedule a call with Melissa, learn a little bit more about it, see if it's a good fit for you. And you do have a special going on, so people could talk to you about your package that you have with deeper work of NLP.
Yeah. So I do have a root cause release package right now, which I have a few spots for, and it's amazing. It's like a deep dive, as it were. So, I'm offering like three release sessions, which are like 2 hours each. And we go deep into a problem, something that, you really want to let go of. And we release that, right? And then we actually install new positive behaviors. And I did tell Jennifer that, if you come to me through her and you tell me I'm a friend of Jennifer's, I will actually throw in a bonus Reiki session, which you can ask Jennifer about it. Like, she can tell you more about it, but I have given her some Reiki as well.
I've done NLP and Reiki with Melissa. She is an amazing healer and practitioner. She also has like amazing guidance and intuition to help us along the situation. And and that's a Reiki session. Thank you, because that is like $129 usually for one Reiki session. So to my friends, if this is a right fit for you, that is an awesome bonus, and that is very valuable. So thank you for offering.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, hope everybody enjoyed this. Something new, maybe something old. I don't know, but I'm just here to share my experience with the world. Everything is through my own lens. We all have our own lens, and I'm just here to help people know about information and knowledge that is here to help them in their journey to higher consciousness and being their best and highest self. So thanks for joining me, Melissa, and I will talk to everybody later this week.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, I just want to say it's so beautiful to see you doing that, because I can feel like this is so much your zone of genius. And ever since I met you, I think of you as like the connector. So,
I love it.
It's amazing. Thank you so much for having me on. Thank you for everyone that was watching. And yeah, lots of love. Have a great day.
Have a great day, everybody. Bye.